So number one says find the domain of f of x is equal to 2 over radical 2 minus x. So when we're talking about domain, we always assume if there's a function that initially all real numbers is our domain. And then we look for two exceptions. We'll look for three later on in the year, but two right now. One is no zero denominator, and the second one is no negative under a radical sign. We have to exclude from our domain any zero denominators or any negative signs underneath a radical. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, well, let's look at my denominator. My denominator is radical 2 minus x. And I'm going to set that equal to 0, because that's going to tell me what x's have to be excluded. Right? Because I know that if it equals 0, then it can't be in my domain. So I will square both sides of the equation. So I get 2 minus x equals 0. I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So I'm going to get negative x equals negative 2. And I'll multiply both sides by negative 1. So I get x equals 2. And that's telling me x. If x equals 2, then my denominator is 0. So one exclusion is that x cannot be equal to 2. So x cannot be equal to 2. And I have this other thing. This problem have both radical signs and denominators. So I need to know what's underneath my radical sign has to be greater than 0. It cannot be a negative number. So to find out what I want to exclude, I'm going to go 2 minus x. Well, if that's less than 0, those are the things that I need to exclude. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'll subtract 2 from both sides. So I'm going to have negative x is less than negative 2. And since I'm trying to find x, I need to multiply both sides of this by negative 1 to make it a positive x. So I'll multiply times negative 1 times negative 1. So I have x, and I have positive 2, but I need to flip my sign here when I'm multiplying by negative numbers. So this is telling me x cannot be greater than 2. Is that right? Yes. Right. So x cannot be equal to 2, and it cannot be greater than 2. So I can write that in any number of ways. I can say x cannot be greater than or equal to 2. That's one way I can do it. I could say x cannot be equal to 2, and x cannot be greater than 2. I could just put it into two different pieces there if I felt more comfortable like it. I could say x must be less than 2. That's the same thing as saying it cannot be greater than or equal to. It has to be less than 2. And a number of people really impressed me, and they wrote in interval notation, negative infinity, comma, 2, telling me that all my domain has to be, can go as low as I want it to go, up to, but not including 2. Any questions on this one? Nope? Sure?